I don't know about you, but when I read this part of Ecclesiastes, I needed to hear that song that I played this morning, There's a Season. There's a time for every season. So that's why we had that going early on. Ecclesiastes, we're in our third chapter this week, and we've been learning some hard truths. One of them is that life is, at its core, Hebel, that Hebrew word that means meaningless or vanity or even absurd, or a vapor, smoke. We can't hold on to anything that we love or care about. It all disappears. And so do we. That's the real point that the teacher of Ecclesiastes made in chapter 2. We all die. And the only way to make sense of our senseless lives is to hold that idea in mind. We are mortal. We can't do everything. We can't have everything. It's all a chasing after the wind. So the teacher finds at the end of his experiments with wisdom and pleasure and success and achievement and even folly that a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. And what does that mean? It means enjoy life while you have it. Receive the good things that God gives you as gifts from God, rather than things to pursue because they're what we need to make us happy. Acknowledging our limits, remembering that we are mortal, helps us to see God's good gifts right in front of us all the time, every day of our lives, eating and drinking and finding satisfaction in our own work. But the teacher isn't done with us yet. While he says we cannot have it all, we can't avoid everything either. And that's what we're talking about in chapter 3. This week we're looking into that poem that we hear read often at funerals, even non-Christian funerals, that expresses the beautiful complexity of the seasons of life. There is a time for every activity under heaven. But this poem is not as comforting as it may first appear. We must read further in the chapter after the poem to see what the teacher means. But first, the poem itself. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to uproot, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search, and a time to give up, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to mend, a time to be silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. Now that is profound. It's made to make us think. And let's state the obvious first. This poem isn't saying, isn't life balanced? No. It's saying, isn't life complicated? After stating the big picture, of birth and then death, the rest of the verses move through different experiences of life that we encounter at one time or another, but not necessarily in order or any kind of progression or logic. Some of the opposites can be grouped into those that express bad times against good times. There's a time for killing, a time for healing, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war, a time for peace. But not all seasons have an opposite that's good or bad. There's a time to embrace and a time to cease from embracing. There's a time to be silent and a time to speak. And each of those things can be good in the right time and in the right way. Others seem even more ambiguous. There's a time to search and a time to give up, a time to gather stones, a time to scatter stones. Which one of those is good, favorable, or unfavorable? And there are so many seasons that we go through. Things like loneliness, conflict, uncertainty, aging, disappointment, widowhood, illness, chronic pain, caregiving, but also love, joy, grace, contentment, peace, healing, being loved, giving, hope. All seasons for almost all of us. A lot of this poem, involves our connectedness with people. It's written to give us perspective. Life is full of problems and awful things like war and mourning and hatred and weeping and killing. It's proof again that our world is broken. We have no control of these things. But wouldn't life be kind of flat without the different seasons we go through? To me, marriage and parenting seem the most obvious seasons that have higher highs and lower lows. But many of us are also siblings, cousins, friends. We have friends from different eras of our lives, and that makes life interesting, at least. And we can make these big, important decisions every day, but the seasons of our lives are almost completely out of our hands, almost completely. We can't arrange them ahead of time. We can't put it in our schedule. I'm going to be joyful for 20 minutes right now and foresee the time of hatred 2 weeks from now. No, we can't even foresee them the way we can foresee the rainy season is about to come, right? So again, this poem isn't saying life is a balance. It's saying life is beautifully complex. And as I said before, it's a mistake to take this poem out of its context with the rest of the chapter and find its real meaning. We need to look at how the teacher follows up in the next verses. The poetry is actually setting up a problem that the prose tries to resolve. We can see that life is beautiful in its contrasts, embracing and refraining, speaking in silence, all of that. That's why you hear these words at funerals. But what you don't hear is the harsh reality of the next verse, which says, "What do workers gain from their toil?" He's back to that again. What do we gain? He says, "I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God." He repeats this all the way through the book. "I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before, and God will call the past to account." So this section starts off with that slap in the face again. What do workers gain from their toil? Those patterns, the rise and fall of seasons, they don't lead to any profit at the end. Life keeps changing without bringing lasting success or fulfillment. God has laid a burden on the human race, and the burden is this: He does make everything beautiful in its time, but He's also made us long for eternity. We have no idea what God has done or is doing or will do besides what He has told us in His Word. The teacher gives us perspective, and it's one that we're meant to have with us as we read the rest of his book. The times of my life are not the only times there are. I am not the center of the universe. I am not God. He says there is a time to be born and a time to die, and then there's a time for judgment. God will call the past to account. One of the ways we learn to live is by preparing to die, and that means realizing that death does mean judgment, and that's a good thing. It gives my present actions meaning and weight. It gives my experienced losses and injustices a voice in God's presence. What is past may be past, but what is past is not forgotten by God. And because he is in charge and lives forever, one day all will be well. Every single thing that happens will have its day in court. Meaning from meaninglessness. Part of being wise in this world is learning to accept that we have only very limited access to the big picture. We often want access to it, for God has put eternity into man's heart. But the point is that we cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. God is not being unkind to us by not sharing his perspective. The point is that we are not built to understand it, the big picture, precisely because we live in time and God does not. If we could see the end from the beginning and understand how 1 billion lives and 1,000 generations and unspeakable sorrows and untold joys all are woven into a tapestry of perfect beauty, well, then we would be God, wouldn't we? To become mature as believers, we need to learn to grow small. We need to come to Jesus' kingdom like little children who understand that their parent knows best. God's judgment means justice, and we have a hardwired longing for justice, don't we? Deny bereaved parents justice for their child's murder, and there are no words for the fury that can consume their hearts. The world is not meant to be like this, we know that. So isn't it wonderful that there will finally be justice? God will retrieve every single injustice. All those times and seasons that we just read about. Every single deed that has ever broken his holy law and tarnished his beautiful world and damaged his image bearers, us. Every one of those moments will be answered by God. Every tear and sorrow, whether for things we have done or had done to us, each one will be sought out by the God who is perfect justice, truth, mercy, love. God can redeem anything, and he will. Ecclesiastes tells us to learn now, today, that there really is a time for everything. Learning now that the season or seasons we are in will not last forever, will not always be the season of our lives, that we will move on. That can help us prepare for the chapters of our lives that God has yet to write. Doesn't mean that giving up or throwing away is going to be any easier when it comes, but it can help us not to be taken by surprise. It can help us adjust our expectations, and especially can help us appreciate with gratitude the experiences we are given and be able to deal with things a bit better when autumn or winter arrives. We do spend much of our lives resisting the season we're in. When it's time to mourn, we want to laugh again. When it's time to wait, we want to control things. When it's time to let go, we want to hold on tighter. But maturity in the Christian life is not learning how to control the times. It's learning how to receive them with gratitude. The teacher is teaching us to grow smaller, not smaller in worth, smaller in illusion. We are not God. We do not see the end from the beginning. We don't know why some chapters in our lives last so long. We can't force winter from spring. But the God who appoints the times is not trapped inside them. And because he stands outside time, no season is meaningless. Not mourning, not waiting, not loss, not aging, not even death. There really is a time for every matter under heaven. And someday when God calls the past to account, we will finally see that not one moment was wasted. Until then, Ecclesiastes teaches us something difficult. Receive the season you are in. Not because it's easy, not because it's painless, but because God is still God there too. Amen.